Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on a terrifying moment in time, an incident in northern Ukraine that didn't just devastate a local region, but actually helped trigger the end of an entire global superpower, both financially and politically. We're going to explore exactly how the physical, radioactive fallout of an unprecedented disaster perfectly mirrored the political fallout of the Soviet Union.
Okay, let's dive into this. The explosion at the Chernobyl atomic power station happened in April of 1986. Now, why does that date matter? Because it was exactly 5 years before the entire Soviet Union collapsed. Just 5 years. So you might be wondering, how could a single human error in nuclear reactor number 4 lead to the unraveling of one of the most powerful rigid empires in human history? Well, to understand that, we can't just look at the explosion itself. We really have to look at the environment that built the reactor in the first place.
Section 1. The Cold War Paranoia, a system built on secrecy. Picture the 1980s. The USSR was navigating a world deeply divided by the Cold War, completely driven by this constant, overarching fear of a nuclear attack. Honestly, nothing illustrates this intense, paranoid geopolitical climate better than the Duga radar. This thing was a massive, highly secret Soviet anti-missile defense system. Its exact purpose was kept completely hidden from the public. It was basically designed to catch incoming missile signals, vibrate, and bounce them right back to the United States. And what's truly wild about this? This immense defense structure sits right near the Chernobyl nuclear reactors. They literally built it there because the logic was, if war happens in Ukraine, it's going to happen to the whole world. The defense of the nation and the generation of its nuclear power were geographically tied together in this giant knot of anxiety.
The source material captures a really chilling sentiment from this era. It goes, "You will not die alone. If we die, we'll die together, or we will survive both together." That captures the absolute collective mindset of the Soviet state perfectly. There was absolutely no room for the individual. The whole shebang was about the collective fate of the USSR. And as you'll see, this rigid mentality, this idea that the state's collective image mattered more than literally anything else, completely dictated their disastrous, secretive response when things went horribly wrong.
Section 2. The Reactor 4 Disaster. April 1986.
So let's zoom in. It's 1 a.m., and deep inside the plant, a staggering human error occurs in reactor number 4. We're not talking about an unavoidable natural disaster here, like an earthquake. This was a human mistake made inside a system that was supposedly infallible. The result? The worst nuclear disaster in world history. But here's the thing. It wasn't the biggest just because of the immediate explosion. It was the biggest based purely on its massive geographical spread. The explosion happens in northern Ukraine, right? But the radiation didn't stay there. It spread like wildfire on the wind. The most severely damaged country was actually neighboring Belarus. From there, this invisible toxic cloud drifted over Poland, and incredibly, it reached all the way to Sweden. Imagine that. A mistake in a single room in Ukraine triggered a crisis that blanketed the European continent.
If you go visit reactor number 4 today, you actually won't see the wreckage directly. What you'll see is a massive concrete shield, literally the largest arch in the world. It was built by the French off-site and then carefully slid over the reactor to permanently trap the deadly radiation that still sits underneath. Now, to put this into perspective, it cost a staggering $2 billion to build. For a Soviet economy that was already on the brink, suddenly having to pour billions of dollars and countless resources into a single catastrophic cover-up, that was an absolute economic death blow. And even now, there's this lingering fear that one day the concrete might degrade and the radiation could escape all over again.
Section 3. A city frozen in time. The 30-kilometer zone. So the area immediately surrounding the reactor was entirely evacuated, becoming the infamous 30-kilometer exclusion zone. When you step into this zone today, you are literally stepping onto streets perfectly frozen in the 1980s Soviet Union. The street names are the exact same. The statues of Lenin are still standing. There's no modern advertising. It's just this unusual, haunting silence. For the people of Pripyat, which was the most important city near Chernobyl, the tragedy unfolded in just hours. After the explosion, a complete evacuation began within the first 40 hours. But here is the ultimate betrayal. Citizens were told it was just a temporary measure. They were told they'd be allowed back in 3 days. Actually, it was a complete lie. Since 1986, it has been an abandoned ghost town with 0 inhabitants. Families left everything behind, trusting a state that flat out refused to tell them the grim truth.
And nature? Nature absorbed the absolute brunt of this disaster. Take the Red Forest. It was once a quiet, lush pinewood, but it absorbed such extreme, deadly levels of radiation that all the trees turned a ginger yellowish color. It effectively became the most radiation-contaminated area in the world. What's so terrifying here is the contrast. You have this eerie, peaceful silence of an abandoned forest. But the second you pull out a Geiger counter, it starts making a terrifying noise, instantly spiking to hundreds or thousands of times the normal radiation level. The threat is entirely invisible.
So the crucial point is this: the danger is still very real today. There are highly toxic, invisible elements like uranium, plutonium, and americium still haunting the zone. If you visit the exclusion zone, your guides will warn you to never ever put your bags or your belongings on the ground. Because if you do, these microscopic radioactive elements will literally stick to your clothes and shoes. The ground itself remains poisoned.
Section 4. The cost of secrecy. State control versus the truth.
The physical disaster was horrifying enough, for sure, but it was the state's obsession with absolute secrecy that fatally worsened the human toll. You see, the Soviet system was fundamentally designed to project strength. It aggressively hid anything that looked even remotely like weakness or failure. One of our sources perfectly captures the sheer terror that enforced this silence, saying, "They used to secrecy, otherwise the KGB would come to your house and then you would be taken somewhere in Siberia." The people living in the Soviet Union were completely conditioned to keep quiet. They saw strange glowing things happening in the sky, they saw the desperate emergency responses, but terrified of the KGB, they stayed totally silent. The state's control over its people's voices was absolute.
And the horrific result of all that secrecy? A cover-up of epic proportions. Get this, the initial state count of casualties a month after the explosion was just 30 people. 30! But the estimated reality? Somewhere between 10,000 to 90,000 long-term casualties. So why this massive discrepancy? Well, because radiation kills you over time. It causes things like thyroid cancer down the line. The Soviet state had an inability, and honestly a willful refusal, to track the actual truth of the radiation's long-term effects. Acknowledging the true numbers would have completely undermined their rigid narrative of control. But as the truth inevitably leaked out, Soviet citizens' trust in their own government was permanently, irreversibly shattered.
Section 5. The Fall of an Empire. A system exposed.
You really can't look at the rusted amusement parks and completely empty, abandoned apartment buildings of Pripyat without seeing a physical metaphor for the Soviet Union itself, a system rotting from the inside out. I mean, think about it. You can threaten a citizen with the KGB to keep them quiet, but you absolutely cannot threaten a radioactive cloud. When that radiation hit Sweden, the international community demanded answers, and it forced the USSR into unprecedented transparency. The Soviet obsession with total control was proven entirely incompatible with the reality of a global catastrophe. This disaster stripped away the state's powerful facade, bankrupting them both financially and morally, and ultimately sealed the geopolitical fate of the entire empire just 5 years later.
Which leaves us with a pretty haunting question to chew on. If a single human error could expose the fatal cracks in a massive superpower, what other secrets remain buried in the exclusion zone? It really makes you think about the colossal cost of state cover-ups and the terrifying power of the invisible truths we try to hide. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, stay curious.